to me, it's sort of like emotion distilled down to this small collection of words. Sometimes I write a poem just on like a feeling, or sometimes I write a poem on a conversation I had, or sometimes it's kind of a mashup of things in one poem. Sitting in my living room one day, and I was like, okay, like hell, I'm just going to write about the ceiling fan, or I'm going to write about this throw pillow on the couch,
Right,
see
right.
where it goes. Even when I only have like 20 minutes to write, I'm like, in my little poetry zone. Like that is what and in this new series I'm working on, I'm, often staring at an object and just really, really being present and mindful. So just the community that poetry enables.
Yeah.
I think there's sometimes a stereotype that writers just kind of like are loners and they sit in their room and they're writing their
Yeah.
scrolling, which can be true sometimes, but I also think it's a wonderful community and it's a way to connect with people in the same way that like other art forms.
Hi there, I'm April Paige, breaking down the what, when, where, and how creatives get their inspiration. I'm a big fan of the cursey words, and I've been a creative for 30 plus years in marketing and fine art. This is where creatives unite to break down the facts of creative life. Buckle up, let's get lost in the world of creativity together.
Welcome, everyone, to Artist Antics with April, where we talk to creatives about creativity. And today I'm very excited to sit down to talk to poet Erin Miller. Erin is not only a poet, but she's a communications specialist, a pet sitter, and an amateur photographer. She earned her MFA in creative writing at Bowling Green State University. Her poetry and reviews have appeared in Best New Poets, The Pinch, Whiskey Island, Blue Stem, Black Warrior Review, and others. Her first chapbook is coming soon from Unicorn Press in spring of 2025. She lives in Durham, North Carolina, near me, and co hosts a poetry open mic in Carrboro, North Carolina. Welcome, Erin. I'm so honored to speak to you today.
Thank you, April. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, welcome to have you. So I'm going to dive right in. I did review several of your pieces. I don't know if that's what you call them, but I mean, I know they're poems, but I feel like they're more than that. They're they're actual art pieces to me. Um, my first question is, how did you become a poet? Like, what sparked that for you? You can go as far back as you want to, but I'd love, the creatives that are listening to us to hear like how that inspired you and how you got hooked, and then take us to, how you got into doing it somewhat professionally. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been writing poetry since I was 11. So it's been a while. I'm 35 now. It started with, I think, one of those in school, they were sort of teaching, us little kids how to write poems. So it was very playful at first. So I was writing a lot about, my friends and my cat and stuff, like silly little rhyming poems. So it was more just about play when I first started writing. And then it's obviously changed as I've gotten older. When I was a teenager, it was all angst, very angsty. It was a way to sort of, like, get my emotions out on the page.
Yeah.
And also just like doing something creative is also really great for mental health. So it was very much rooted in mental health. Then in my undergraduate and graduate times, I really started learning the craft of poetry, and it was
Mm.
kind of the first time I was getting feedback from professors saying like, "Oh, you actually have a talent for this," which was a good motivator. So I knew then in undergrad really that I wanted to pursue it and keep doing it, and I knew I wanted to, have a book published one day, and it was something I wanted to dedicate time to. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's a few different reasons what sort of motivates me to do it or what draws me to poetry. I think can, to me, it's sort of like emotion distilled down to this small collection of words. I think in a way, like obviously like novels and longer pieces of prose are impressive in their own ways, but I also think it's impressive that someone can like distill down an emotion or a conversation or some big topic about love in like, 100 words or less. So I think
Yeah.
that's really powerful. And a lot of the poems that I read, the poetry I read are very short.
Yeah.
Um, my poetry is very short. I just happen to, yeah, I really love that. I also love just the community that poetry enables.
Yeah.
I think there's this, there's sometimes a stereotype that writers just kind of like are loners and they sit in their room and they're writing their
Yeah.
scrolling, which can be true sometimes, but I also think it's a wonderful community and it's a way to connect with people in the same way that like other art forms
Yeah.
can achieve. So like if someone can like I've read a lot of poetry of people that I've never met before, but I feel
Right.
like I have like a connection to those poets just from
Yeah.
their page, which is really powerful.
No, I believe that wholeheartedly. A couple of points come to me as you're talking about that is, you know, um, it really is about the detail and observing of life and taking all of that in and then being able to creatively express that and not only, with your own style, but also where it resonates with people, who have experienced it or maybe not have experienced it, but get it from what you're saying. I really think it is a true art form. And I don't think there are enough poets nowadays, in my humble opinion. But that's so great to hear you say that there's a community out there. If there's one we can share in the description, I'd love to do that. But so, what is your writing process from inspiration to end piece? Does it vary? I've asked all the creatives on the channel so far, and everybody does it differently, depending if it's a photographer or fine artist or whoever it is. And I'm just curious, like, what is your process? Does it vary? And take us through like the steps, maybe from inspiration to end piece.
Yeah, so it does vary a bit depending on what I'm writing. But there are a few things that I always stick by with my writing process. So I always try to write twice a week. It's usually on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Those are my writing days. And it's not very long. I take like 30 minutes to an hour. I just am a very busy person, so I have to
Yeah.
squeeze it in. I have my full-time job and my side hustle basically as a pet sitter, and I'm a climber, so I'm climbing and times with friends and family and volunteer. Just there's lots of life stuff.
Yeah.
So I do have to squeeze it in, but it is a priority, so I always try to make time for it. So yes, twice a week. I always write a first draft on pen and paper instead versus typing. There have been there have been studies actually that show that your brain just engages more with what you're writing if you are doing it on pen and paper. It sort of opens it up. I also think I read something about how when you're typing, you sort of tap into your like editor mode already.
Mm.
Like up and
Mhm.
you're like backspacing your whereas like if it's sort of messy on the page, you're just like getting stuff out. It's a little more conducive to like a first draft.
Great.
And then obviously I'll type it up and edit it after that. But first draft is always on pen and paper. The third thing I always do, which people always find funny, I just started this a few years ago, but I literally go to this website called randomwordgenerator.com.
Oh,
I shuffle through and find 5 or 6 words, like random words, and I have to use those words in the poem. So it's like another way of,
keeping you agile. Yeah.
yeah,
Keeping
like,
you, training yourself, like challenging yourself. Yeah. No, I get that. I do the
yes,
same thing with art. Like I restrict the color palette and then I say, okay, I can't paint with a paintbrush, anything but a paintbrush. Like what do I do? So
yeah.
yeah, it keeps it interesting for you as well. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, 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 that's exactly right. It just sort of like breaks open my brain a bit, allows me to challenge myself, get a little more creative. So that's something that's actually been working really well for me lately.
So then how do you take it from so you do that initial like brain dump or you use those challenge words and then where do you go from there in your process? Like how do you start playing with it?
Yeah. So yeah, it sort of depends on, like I said, what I'm working on.
Mhm.
Sometimes I write a poem just on like a feeling, or sometimes I write a poem on a conversation I had, or sometimes it's kind of a mashup of things in one poem. currently I'm actually working on a project about a series of poems about ordinary objects, which
Mm.
has been super fun. I started it, about a year ago, and basically I was in a place where I felt like I was in a rut with my writing. I felt like I was writing the same thing over and over again, and I just kind of wanted to get out of my head and write something different. So I was sitting in my living room one day and I was like, okay, like, hell, I'm just going to write about the ceiling fan, or I'm going to write about this throw pillow on the couch,
Right,
see
right.
where it goes. Um, and it's actually been like really effective for what I was intending on doing with it. In that I'm still writing about, the things I want to write about, but using these objects as sort of like a conduit to write about those things. Instead of, I don't know, writing about the same like breakup poem over and over again,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
it's like a little more interesting when there's like something,
Yeah,
tangible.
tangible. Yeah, no, that's great. I think, 2 things. One is, I know how important it is for creatives to have a set time to sit down and, at the desk or the easel or whatever it is that they're doing, the camera, to have that set time to create. And even if they're not feeling it, I know that's really important to have it there. Like, you have to be present in order to do it, right? So I think that's really important and really great that you have set days that you're doing that. I know we all have to change those sometimes, but in general. And then writing by hand, I uh, firmly believe that writing by hand brings in more feeling. I don't know, to your point where you're saying you're in editor mode already, and I totally get that because when I'm working in my corporate job, absolutely, that's immediately where I go when I'm typing. But I think it's so important for our audience because I really think that when you let yourself go and you let yourself just flow. We talk about the flow a lot, with all the creatives on the channel about being in the flow and not stopping yourself or taking yourself out of that. And interesting, you're talking about just picking something and writing about it. I had another interviewee who was talking about writing a song about trees, and just came to him, and he was like, who the heck wants to hear a song about trees? And you judge yourself. So I think it's really important to get it out so that you're not restricting yourself on what's coming, and then go back and edit and do whatever it is you need to do, to make it something that's cohesive or that's understandable by your audience. So I think that's great. So what's your, like, once you get that out, uh then you start editing and moving it together and then go to the final piece. How does that look?
Yeah, I
Do
when
you
I
study the structure, like free verse or traditional or experimental? I mean, I know there's haikus and all the other different types of poem structure that you can do, but um I'm just curious, like, do you decide the structure after you get it out, or like how does that look?
Yeah, gosh, there's so many ways to structure a poem,
Yeah.
building them out. I never think of structure on a first draft. The first draft is always just like a block
Done.
on
Yeah.
the page, when I write it and then when I initially type it out. It's just there's no form to it.
Mhm.
Form, I usually like my poems, each poem usually goes through like 3 to 6 drafts. I do a lot of like edits, a lot of like separate drafts. So the form often comes on like like second or third or fourth draft. So it comes later.
Mm.
I'm mostly thinking about the language and the images and like the emotions I'm getting across, and the ending. Like the ending of a poem is so important. It's often where like a turn is, like a turn of emotion or something surprising is often at the end. So I always want to make sure I have like a killer ending. And then, yeah, I do prefer free verse, so I don't often have any kind of like rhyme scheme or anything like that. It's interesting. There's a performer who comes to the open mic that I co-host who writes only in sonnets, and like they're amazing and they're incredible. But I am not that person.
Right.
It's just how my it's just how my brain works. I just prefer free verse and sort of like
Yeah.
see where it wants to go on the page. It's funny, poets always talk about their poems as if they're like they have some kind of consciousness.
Yes,
So
they're an entity. Yes.
yeah, what is I'm sure other artists do this too, but like what does the poem want? So
Yeah. No, I treat
yeah,
my canvases like they're my babies. So yes, I know what you mean.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, and then gosh, it's hard to know when a poem is done, but I think like as long as I feel like I feel confident enough to submit it
Mhm.
for publication, then I feel like it's, done.
Yeah, I have to sit with my paintings sometimes. I put them up in my living room and sit there and look at them. And I have to really, after a couple of days, really feel like it's still good. Like there's nothing I'm sitting there going, I really should change that. It's bothering me?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to, just like you, trying to get out of my old style. So I'm working on a whole new style of trying to put energy and more, more feeling, for the back of lack of a better term, on the canvas. And um it took me a while to figure out what that meant to me. Like, what does that mean in real technical, steps? Like, what is that? What do I need to do to make that happen? And there's this fine line of writing the edge of, I call it the razor's edge, because you have to have the technical skill, but you also have to let yourself go and be able to let it come out and not judge yourself. Everybody I've talked to, we talk about imposter syndrome and judging ourselves and being our harshest critic. It's something that everybody, I think, does inherently with the way the world is at the moment. But so, do you write for yourself or certain audiences? Does that vary? Is it just you're trying to make happy? Because right now that's what I'm doing. And my new style, I'm just trying to make myself happy at the moment. I'm not trying to meet a commercial, niche or commercial spot that I think will sell. I'm just trying to do what I think is fascinating and makes me want to put it on my wall. So I'm just curious, with a poem, like, do you have that in advance or does that come at the end? Like, what does that look like as far as the audience?
Yeah, I think both are completely valid. Doing art for yourself versus doing art for other people or community or whatever you want to call it. Um, I I think both. I think my answer is both. Oh, I do write for myself. There's a period of time where I didn't write for a year, maybe over a year, and I just like wasn't happy. For other reasons too, but I just wasn't, like I wasn't creating art. So it still taps into that, mental health benefit that I was talking about earlier.
Oh, yeah. I think everybody should do something.
Yeah,
We talk about that a lot. And, I don't, it doesn't matter if you can't write or you can't paint or you can't take a photo professionally, whatever it is. If it's something that really jazzes you, when you were younger and you've always wanted to do it, I think being creative, the act of creativity, is what is helping your brain and your soul to be creative. I think is the spot that you want to be to bring happiness and freedom into your life. Like, and even if it's fleeting, like sometimes that's only 10 minutes out of the 5 hours I just spent, preparing and ending or whatever. Um, and sometimes it's that whole time and I get lost in what I call the zone, and I look up and it's 2 in the morning, and I'm like, oh crap, I gotta go to bed. I gotta get up and work tomorrow. So, like, I think it's just so important for mental health for everybody to have some kind of creative outlet, and even if it's just moving their body, they don't have to do, it doesn't have to be in the arts. It could be, they learn how to do, yoga or tai chi or whatever it is,
Mhm.
just to get some kind of meditation going. Because I think of it as a meditation. I don't know, because I've never tried to write a poem. I I don't know if that's like a zone you get into. I'd love to hear about that because I'm very curious.
Yeah, definitely. Even when I only have like 20 minutes to write, I'm like, in my little poetry zone. Like that is when and in this new series I'm working on, I'm, often staring at an object and just really, really being present and mindful. So I think that's a part of it.
Mm,
A part of the mental health benefit for all art forms is if you're sitting down and painting, you are like really being present with that
that's
painting. And if
great.
you're sitting down and writing a poem, like you are being present. So I think there are a lot of reasons why it has mental health benefits in that you're like stimulating your brain in interesting ways. You're being present with something. You're creating something new, which can feel, I feel proud when I write something that I feel really, what's the word I'm trying to think of? I feel very stimulated and fulfilled when I write something that I'm proud of. So, or if I get, feedback from other people that they really connected with it, that's like sort of the ultimate
Yep.
compliment for me is when they say like, "Oh, I really, resonated with that," because then
Yep.
that's where the community aspect comes in too,
Yeah.
which is so important to me. Community in general is really important to me, so it just makes sense that it also is important in my poetry.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I do often, well, sometimes I get in the zone, sometimes it's more of an uphill battle to get something
Yes.
on the page as, any artist.
Yeah. And to your point, it depends what's happening in your life at that moment, right? So if you have, everybody's stressed out for the holidays right now. If you have all of that going on and people coming to visit and you having to go get things that you don't normally have to get and do things you don't normally have to do, and there's time limits on everything, and you're trying to, get everything done and make everyone happy. It's a time where if you do try to sit down in those moments, you're like, "Oh my god, I'm just gonna sit here for 20 minutes because I can't create. There's too much going on in my brain?" So, I think that's important. I mean, if you can take the time and ratchet down, I think that's great. For me, it's like I have to have some zen. I can't create if I'm really in a bad space because it's not going to go well, or at least I haven't tried it. So I don't feel motivated to do it when I'm in a bad headspace because I feel like it's like a happy joyful thing, but maybe I should try and, do that when I'm not, in a good mood when I set my times. Who knows? Because 'Cause I've heard from songwriters that, sometimes they're in the worst space ever and the happiest song comes out, or they're in the happiest spot ever and the, saddest song comes out from nowhere. They talk about it being in the ethers and, coming to them, as a receiver, or, and I think, what we were talking about before, if you set that time where on Tuesdays and Thursdays where you're going to sit down and do that, that's that time where you can take a breath and say, okay, now I'm going to do this and be present. So when you're present in that moment, because I like to demystify, being a creative for the people that haven't tried it. When you sit down in that moment to be creative, do you feel like some of it is coming from you? I mean, I know you're doing this exercise of looking at objects right now, but uh, do you just let it flow? Do you feel like it's a coming from somewhere else or from you entirely? Like, I'm just curious about your inspiration. Yeah.
Um, that's a good question. Yeah, I do feel like it's coming from me for the most part. I also love there are like certain philosophies that say there's like a consciousness I mean, there is a consciousness to some nature, to like animals and things like that, but that there's a consciousness to plants and there's a consciousness even to like
That's right.
objects, like a stone. Um, and I don't know how much I believe that or not, but I love that as a philosophy. So yeah, I love to believe that maybe these objects that I'm writing about do have like are sort of giving me something
Right.
way to write these poems. And it feels kind of synergistic in that way. But yeah, it does sometimes feel like when you're really in the zone, it does feel like you're not even creating it. It feels like something else is like some
Leading you.
divine
Yeah.
intervention is happening. So I don't know what to call that. I know
Yeah.
it is. I love
I
it.
call it the flow.
Yeah, I I love it when it happens.
Yeah.
How it happens, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's fair statement. I don't know how it happens either, and I don't know when it happens. Like the times where I want it to happen and I think I'm having a great day and I have all this time and I'm so excited to get to the canvas and then I'm like, wah wah wah. you know, what happened? Where is it? And then times when I'm just like, I gotta get this done, and then it starts happening, and I'm like, crap, it's 2 a.m. And I just lost track of literally everything, and but I love it when it actually does happen because it means I'm outside of my own mind and I'm not letting all of those thoughts, that monkey mind that they talk about, bombard me with everything that I'm not doing or need to do or need to think about. So what's your favorite poetry creation story today? Like, is there something ambitious, inspiring, funny, and it doesn't have to be you. Like, do you have, somebody that had an interesting poetry creation story? I'd just love to hear those because I think, you know, creatives don't get to hear some of those neat stories that happen in the background. Yeah.
Poetry. I do have sort of a funny story about how me and my open mic co-host met. So I co-host the open mic. It's called the Chime In. It's at Lonzo's Cafe in Carborough, and that happens on the second and fourth Friday of every month. So for folks in the Triangle area, North
Very
Carolina,
good. We'll put it in the description. Yeah.
yeah, so I co-host the open mic with my friend Joe O'Keefe, who's also a wonderful poet. So gosh, when was this? A couple years ago, I want to say, I used to go to this also really great open mic, but mostly music open mic in Hillsborough at Yonder Bar, if you've been there.
Okay.
Um, Wonderful music open mic. They occasionally will get some poets.
Yeah.
So I was going there, I don't know, a couple times a month. And I went there one night to read some poems. And Joe had just moved to the area, found out about this open mic, showed up, and he saw on the sign up sheet, it was like musician, musician, musician. And then like one poet, there I was, like the one poet among all the musicians. And he's like,
Mhm.
who is this, ballsy person who read some poems amidst all these musicians. So then he proceeded to just approach random people in the bar and he's like, hey, are you Erin? Are you Erin? To try to find me. And eventually he found me and we started talking about poetry and yeah, just sort of immediately became friends through poetry. And yeah, and then, probably a few months into our friendship, we were talking about how we wish there's so many great music open mics in the area, but
Yep.
there really find any that were dedicated to poetry. So we're like, well, let's create it ourselves. And we've been doing that for a little over a year now. And it's been so nice. It's just such a nice community, like
Awesome.
incredibly talented people come through. It just blows my mind every time. Like I don't know how many open mics you go to, but they can be hit or miss.
Yeah. No,
Um,
for sure.
Just like which is totally fair. I think there are people starting out who are just sort of like getting their
Yep.
voice. So I think it's fine if people are sort of struggling on the mic. Um, but yeah, I am just constantly impressed with the level of talent that comes through our open mic and just like how like loving and open people are. It's been really great.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That makes my heart very happy to hear that, you saw a need, you both saw a need together in your friendship and then filled that, and that I wish everybody would start to do that, and really start to create or find a niche that you know, everybody can join in on to build community. I mean, basically, what I'm trying to do with my channel is try to build a community of creatives and have them, eventually reach out to each other. So I think that's great. So, um, what other poets inspire you? What are some of your favorite poets?
Oh, so many. But the two that always come to mind are Sharon Olds and Ada Limon. Gosh, they're
Mhm.
just
I know there are a ton.
yeah,
I
uh,
know that's a tough question. That's
yeah,
like saying, well, what artists do I like? And, there's so many different kind of genres and things that, have their own uniqueness. But
yeah,
I know one of my favorites is Rumi, just because of his distinct, what you were saying before, his use of very little words to convey just the strongest of feelings. And they're all around love mostly, but I um I don't know, he's resonated with me throughout my adulthood, and I just really can't get enough of him. But
yeah. I
yeah,
was
go ahead.
I was just gonna say I was just talking to someone about Rumi.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So love Rumi, and then yeah, with Sharon Olds and Ada Limon. I think the reason I'm so drawn to their work is they often write about everyday things, ordinary things, but they write about them in like very original, very risky ways
Mm,
that I love. It's just like I just adore it. I'm always really captivated by the work. It always feels, I don't know,
yeah.
like there's some kind of human truth to it that I can connect to, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's wonderful. So I often write about yeah, kind of ordinary.
Yeah, I see where you got it from.
Yeah, yeah. So they've both informed my own writing a lot.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I know there's an artist, that I follow, he's an illustrator for a magazine, but, he challenged himself by picking an ordinary shape, like the shape of an iron, of like, clothes iron, and using it in anything he could think of to represent, that shape. Like it could be a nose, it could be, a foot, or, whatever. So he challenged himself every day to use it in a different drawing, and for a year, the same shape. And I was like, wow, you know. So just like you were saying, it challenged him. Yeah, so that's great. So, and one of my final questions is, what do you think about AI and its use in art and any kind of art form, including poetry? And yeah, I've been asking everyone that question, and I just love to get your take on that.
Yes. Such a hairy question.
It is.
I yeah, it's
Also a double-edged sword.
yeah, I work for a tech company essentially doing internal communications.
Mhm.
My role is a little hard to describe, but yeah, I work for a tech company, so I feel like my answer should be like AI is great, but it's not great for all things. Art and poetry being one of those things. I think it's a very nascent technology. There are a lot of wrinkles that need to be smoothed out. It's affecting the art world in a negative way right now. I think people are using it to design something or to make a video or to write a poem or write an email or whatever, um,
Mhm.
instead of yeah doing that work or like supporting artists who do that. Even artists are using it, and it's I don't know. I think there are lots of opportunities with AI for lots of different reasons, and I think it can be helpful in the art world, but the way that we're using it right now is I don't think the most responsible way to use it. It's funny, I keep seeing this meme going around. It says something like, let's use AI to fold our laundry so we can make art, not the other way around. So I'm like, we're using it for the wrong things. Like, we should be doing the creative things,
Right,
and making AI do all the stuff we don't want to do. So it's,
right.
yeah,
I agree with that. I don't think the need for art will go human created art by hand, you know? I don't think that's gonna ever go away. That's just my own personal opinion. I think that it's helpful in some forms, what you were talking about with, emails or, things that I don't necessarily consider artistic. Um, for me, I use it to quickly see if I will like something. So maybe tell it to do two different artists that I love and mash it up and pick a, subject and say, paint a painting using these two styles and mash them just to see what it will come up with that maybe I didn't think of. I think that has been helpful for me, but would I use it to create a piece? I don't think so. I mean, even if I did, translating that by hand on a canvas, I don't think will ever be the same. Um, so I think it is a double-edged sword. Like there's going to be a dark AI, just like there's a dark web. And I think, we're going to have to, it's in its infancy and we don't know what it's going to grow up to be yet. But yeah, I don't know that any of it will go away. Like, I mean, any of the human side, even in the prompts, you have to have the ideas to put into the prompts in order to get it to go. But
Yeah.
yeah, I know, as far as writing, it's definitely, and being a poet, it's definitely something that I would want to, as an artist of words, want to make sure that, people understand the value. And yeah, I hope that that's where it heads, if we can't police it, at least to your point, we can police ourselves. So, yeah, I'm going to leave that there. Um, so, as far as like the future of poetry, would you, and I'm just asking everyone this question in their own, medium, like, where would you like to see the future of poetry go? Let's take AI out of it, but like, uh, yeah, I'm just going to ask the question without prompting any further. Like, where would you like the future of poetry to go? Yeah.
Yeah, I think early in the interview you mentioned that like there it doesn't seem like there are many poets. And there's this,
Yep.
there's this joke that like only poets read poetry. Uh, I would love to see that change. I think
Yeah.
gosh, even in like sometimes people will come up to me at like open mic, for example, and they'll say like, "Oh, well, I don't have an MFA, a Master of Fine Arts in poetry, so I'm not a real poet," or like, "I'm not published, so I'm not a real poet." And like, I don't know, I reject that. I feel like anyone can be a poet. I don't think you have to be published to be a poet. Poetry is for everyone, and I hope people don't forget that. I think like especially learning all the classics in school that are like just steeped in metaphor, and you have to explicate it to understand what the heck they're saying. I think that's what people sometimes think all poetry is.
Yeah.
It's not. There's lots of like very accessible poetry out there. So I would love to see more people try it. I'd like to see it
Mhm.
just more, yeah, more just become more of a popular art form. Although if that's going to make it more competitive to get to publish a book, maybe I don't want that.
Yeah,
um,
be careful what you wish for. No, the way I think about it is I think there's room for everybody. I think everybody's going to have a different perspective. Like even if I paint with an artist right next to me and we're painting from the same image reference, I don't think it's going to turn out the same at all. Like there's no way, even if we're painting with the same color and the same perspective, like there's no way. It's just not going to. So I personally think there's room for everyone in whatever art that you're in. And I think there's a less barrier to entry in art than there ever was,
yeah.
for everyone. Um, you know, and something came to me when you were talking about that is about copywriting. So I know, I have to put a copyright symbol and, the information on the back of my piece to make sure that, if it is used, that I have the rights to make sure that it's not used for public consumption without my permission. Like, is that the same for you? And how does that look as far as copywriting your pieces?
Yeah, it's I I really don't think many people are kind of like stealing poems, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't it's less of a thing I think that like writers have to worry about versus visual artists.
Mhm.
Um, I know, like, obviously, if well, maybe not obviously, but if a poem is published in a journal, then that journal holds the copyright for that piece. It's often either in a physical journal or somewhere online. So yeah,
Yeah.
someone could just go online and copy and paste it and say like, "Hey, this is my poem."
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
don't know how many people are doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just curious. I've had people uh copy what I'm doing, and
Really.
then I've had to reach out to them and say, "Please stop that." And but yeah, it happens, and usually I'm not even looking for it. It's other people that recognize that, that's what's happening, and send me a text or a note and be like, "You should look into this." So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, yeah, it's unfortunate but true. So great. I want to thank you, and thank you for your time today. And we'll provide all that information that you gave us in the description for the open mic, and any info to get a hold of you. And I really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, April.
If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Feel free to nominate yourself or someone you know as our next guest. Thank you for being a part of our creative community. Stay inspired and keep shining bright.